Live. We are live. It is happening. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, a special edition, a special edition. Let's let the YouTube catch up here. We'll let the YouTube catch up here, and then we'll jump in. I have a special guest. I'm real excited because I've been reading this guy for a while now. I'm a big fan of his blog, and I've emailed him. I'm like, hey, I dig your blog. I'd like to chat with you. I have a million questions. He is a broadband development consultant, and he goes all over the world for this work. So, you know me, I love municipal broadband. We've talked about universal broadband earlier this morning because Liz Warren has been talking about it. She's not the first 2020 candidate to talk about it. Bernie Sanders was, but this is picking up some steam. This movement is picking up some steam. And this gentleman is a professional in that arena. He knows a lot about it. He's going to make me feel dumb a number of times in a good way. Please welcome Steve Blum, a broadband development consultant. Steve, thanks for being here, buddy.
Well, thanks for that intro. That was I'm not sure any of my friends would recognize me from that.
Very humble of you to say, but no, I love your work. You write really great on broadband. You write great on net neutrality, and I learn a lot reading your stuff, especially. And you do this all over the world, but you really have your thumb on the pulse in California because it's your home state. It's my home state as well. So let's get into this morning. So Elizabeth Warren did talk about universal broadband. You saw that in the news. So do you think like this is going to have a seat at the table in 2020? Do you think there's any kind of serious proposals out there? And from your perspective, how feasible would it be to have a universal broadband system all across the United States?
Well, it's like anything else, like any other infrastructure proposal. Just add money. It's not completely off the charts in terms of when you look at what it would cost for universal broadband over, to deploy it over the next 5 to 10 years versus the federal budget. But there are a lot of other things that are competing for attention in Washington and in the on the national stage right now. And whether broadband pings up to the point that it's really universal broadband is an issue. I haven't seen that yet. So I'm glad candidates are talking about it. I think it's an important issue, but I'm going to wait. Show me the money.
Sure. So let's get specific to California here, because this is a topic that I've talked about some, and your blog has really helped me unpack it. But AB 1366.
Yeah.
What exactly does that do? What potential does that give us?
So on the face of it, Assembly Bill 1366 is about extending an existing ban on regulation of what are called Internet Protocol enabled services, which is just another way of saying anything that rides on the internet. In theory, it wouldn't apply to broadband service itself, because that's the internet protocol that these services are enabled by. But there was a ban put into place about 6 years ago, and that was back when nobody was really sure where internet services were going. Facebook was, it was there and it was starting to take off, as was Twitter and everything else. But it was, nobody was really sure where it was going. So the legislature passed a bill that said we're going to prohibit state agencies and local governments from regulating IP, Internet Protocol enabled services. That includes voice over Internet Protocol services, as well as, again, things like it could be email, it could be anything that rides on the internet. At the time, I thought it was a good idea. Jumping in and trying to regulate something that's in its infancy is not a great idea. A lot has changed, though, in the last 6 years. That ban is due to expire at the end of this year. And if it just simply expires, then state agencies, in particular the California Public Utilities Commission, would be able to come in and regulate certain services. The one service that has everybody's attention right now is voice over internet protocol service, which is just 21st century telephone service. It's an important thing to be worried about because right now, the only regulation of telecommunications in California at the state level is of traditional telephone service, what's called POTS, plain old telephone service. You know, the rotary dial phone with the dial tone and all that.
And so let me jump in here. And that is a Title II designation, correct? Like, so that is treated like a utility.
That is Title II. Yeah, it's traditional telephone service. Yeah, I mean, forget for a moment what the FCC says about broadband not being telecommunications and all that. This is completely separate from that.
Okay.
Regular plain old telephone service is regulated by the California Public Utilities Commission, and there's various regulations. Rates aren't so much regulated anymore, but there's service quality requirements. There's various requirements attached to labor agreements and consumer requirements and things like that. I mean, there's 100 years of regulatory overhead and regulatory history of telephone service. Now, what AT&T and Frontier, but it's AT&T is the big kahuna in this state. What AT&T has been doing over the last 6 years is moving people from the plain old telephone service, POTS technology, to voice over internet protocol. Most people, when they upgrade their internet service with AT&T, they get this big modem, this big black modem that has a couple of phone jacks in the back, and that's the tech comes in and rewires their house so that their telephone service is coming out of that modem, which is fine. It's voice over internet protocol service. It's not being delivered by 40 volts of electricity coming through copper wires anymore. So in technological terms, I think it's a great thing. It's the new stuff. There's a lot of things you can do with voice over internet protocol technology. But what AT&T has done by moving people off of the old technology and onto the new technology is they've taken people out of a regulated service and put them into an unregulated service. And if you look at the trend, there's more people on VoIP lines now in California than on plain old telephone service. And there's fewer and fewer every day. If you don't regulate VoIP the same way you regulate plain old telephone service, you're not going to have any telecommunications regulation at all. Maybe that's a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't be regulating telecommunications services. I mean, I'm willing to have that discussion, but we need to have that discussion. What AB 1366 would do would be simply to extend a ban that was never intended to do what it's doing now, and just by default deregulate telecommunications. I mean, want to have the debate, great, but don't do it by the back door.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. So if AB 1366 expires, that means that AT&T and Big Cable could then kind of dictate VoIP. If it does not? Okay.
So if 1366 passes, it'll extend Senate bill. I think it was 1161 was the bill before, but there was a bill, like I said, 6 years ago. It had a 6-year time limit on it. And
right.
So if 1366 isn't passed, that ban expires, and then the PUC or perhaps another state agency, but right now it kind of centers on the PUC. The PUC can come in and say, okay, we're going to regulate telephone service as telephone service, and we're not going to be paying much attention to what the underlying technology is. If you have to meet, for example, 911 standards for the old copper-based stuff, you're going to have to meet those same 911 standards for VoIP. If there are lifeline programs if there's consumer protections, if there's labor protections, all that, if there's quality of service requirements, all those things would be transferred over from the old technology to the new technology. That the regulation would follow the service, not the legacy technology that's going away.
Okay. All right. So then how does this particular policy bleed into municipal broadband, or does it?
It doesn't. It doesn't have a direct impact on municipal broadband. It does have an impact on broadband service. And if you're affecting the broadband market, then yeah, you're going to have an effect on municipal broadband. But the effect it's going to have on broadband service is that as telecommunications regulation essentially goes away in California, there's no basis for the California Public Utilities Commission, for example. In theory, or one of the theories is, they would have no basis for enforcing any type of quality of service or doing any type of research. CPUC just finished up a great piece of research, just published it a couple of weeks ago, about telephone service in California. Now, the research was about telephone service, but it was really about broadband and the telecommunications infrastructure that we have. So all the regulation of telecommunications infrastructure goes away. You're going to have nobody looking after what's happening out on the poles or underground, what type of service people are getting in their homes, and that has a big impact. To a certain extent, I mean, I guess you could argue that it'd be a good thing for municipal broadband, because the worse job the commercial guys do, the better the argument for muni broadband is. But that's a poor way to go about it.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like, well, let's just let it go to the point where it is so terrible there is almost no return, and then people will just be like, okay, let's see if the city can do better. Which, yeah, I think if we let it get to that point, we're just going to lose the medium as we know it.
That's not. I mean, you wouldn't want to do that with roads or sewers, right?
Right.
So, let's just. I mean, I believe in, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But it is broke, and we do need to fix it. And let's not let it disappear first.
So, what are some of the municipal broadband projects going on in California right now that you're cognizant of and hopeful for?
So, muni broadband in California takes a lot of different. Takes a lot of different faces, a lot of different ways of going about it. Unlike a lot of states, California doesn't have a lot of publicly run internet service providers, consumer-facing internet service providers. City of Loma Linda down in Riverside County has a municipal broadband system, fiber to the home system. It's really geared towards the unique circumstances of Loma Linda, as they like to say there. They have more hospital beds than homes, so it's a special case. Have a couple other cities, Ontario, which isn't too far from Loma Linda, and then Brentwood out in eastern Contra Costa County, that have partnered with private sector ISPs to use municipal facilities. In Brentwood's case, it's conduit that was installed as the town was built out over the last 25 years. And in Ontario, it's also conduit and fiber in new developments. Those are good things to watch. Other fiber to the home projects, municipal fiber to the home projects, haven't gone as far. There was an effort in Santa Cruz, city of Santa Cruz, a couple of years back, and the issue that you run into in municipal broadband, and it's a huge problem, it's a big issue in California, is who's going to pay, particularly who's going to pay if the business model doesn't meet expectations. In other words, who is going to bear the risk? Cities in California are strapped for cash. There are a lot of competing demands on tax money in California. Our taxes are high here, but even so, there's a lot of demands on that money. And cities are very, very cautious about taking on any type of new long-term obligations. So in Santa Cruz, they went a different direction, and they went a direction I think that more cities are taking here, which is cities are starting to build out backbone fiber and then making that fiber available to private internet service providers, as well as institutional users, major corporations, people that can use those kind of fundamental building blocks, but that they can use those to build out service to residences. So you're starting to see fiber to the home service from an independent operator in Santa Cruz, Cruz.io. They have about a 15% market share up there. What you're also seeing in Santa Cruz is AT&T coming into neighborhoods and building out fiber to the home there. As this is something I've been seeing for the last 15, 20 years, but PUC's report from a couple of weeks ago confirms it. AT&T and Frontier and everybody else, but AT&T in this case, they build where there's a threat of competition. So a credible threat of competition from a muni provider produces better infrastructure from the commercial providers in town. So it's really the dark fiber model that cities in California are pursuing. They're also starting to look at wireless as a potential municipal resource, but there's a couple issues. One is it's early days yet for a lot of the major 5G wireless upgrades that people have been talking about. We're probably not going to see everything everybody's promising. You never do, but we don't really know what shape that's going to be. The other is that the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has preempted or is trying to preempt a lot of the discretion cities have in terms of wireless policy. So it's a running battle. It's a running battle with the FCC these days, period. Anytime a muni wants to do it. He had one commissioner basically declaring that muni broadband was a threat to, truth, justice, and the American way, and that there's probably muni fiber hiding under every bed along with the communists, so it's a
I saw that. They tried to make it like it was a free speech issue. Like, you're infringing on the free speech of Comcast to screw you. You're infringing on their free speech to do that. So how feasible or not feasible would a statewide broadband project be?
Again, add money.
So from a tech standpoint, it's very feasible. The building infrastructure would be like a pretty simple to do. It's just a matter of money.
Well, if you want a good idea what the challenges would be, take a look at what's going on with PG&E right now. It's electricity, but the infrastructure is remarkably similar, right? It's wires strung on poles and buried underground. It's not magic. PG&E is in bankruptcy. You have creditors and all types of interests right now trying to get their piece of the pie from bankruptcy court. But one of the things that's going on is that cities, San Francisco is taking the lead on this. Cities are looking at taking over or trying to take over PG&E's operations in their jurisdiction. And you start to look at the tab in San Francisco. For them to buy out PG&E would probably be a couple $2 billion. It would be the same in California if you tried to essentially socialize, nationalize. I think of California as a nation. If you tried to nationalize the telecommunications infrastructure as well, going out and building on rather than just essentially nationalizing and buying out the existing providers, going and building a third system on top of what we have, second or third, depending on where you're at. Again, you're talking mega billions.
Yeah. Well, sounds like also a lot of jobs, A, and B, we're the 5th largest GDP in the world. I think we can pull it off. I think if anyone can pull it off, it's up. I think the PG&E example, it's almost like that sort of goes into the theme we just talked about last time, though, where it's just like if someone's as corrupt as PG&E, a city might be like, we might as well buy this. This is pretty bad. How many more fires can they?
Yeah, I mean, I have probably have a kinder view of PG&E than most people, because I look at them from a telecommunications perspective. They're a major owner and leaseor of dark fiber.
Mhm.
So they compete with, on that level, they compete with AT&T and Comcast and anybody. The
Sure,
enemy of
sure,
my
sure.
enemy is
Yeah.
my friend. I mean, it's
No, I'm speaking more of like when the fires happen and they
oh
tried
yeah, yeah, yeah.
when they
Right.
tried to put that on consumers. I was referring to that specifically, trying
Oh,
to.
and there's the whole thing with, they're under investigation now
Yeah.
for the way they handle their underground, what's called underground service alerts, but the way they manage their underground facilities, including their gas lines. I mean, it's you just want to just
Sure. I mean, well, and it's just, and it goes to the bigger theme. I mean, I was just trying to make a joke about it,
yeah,
but it
right,
does go to the bigger theme that is very real of why not let the cities affect the people that live
yeah,
there. So why not put the cities in charge of this infrastructure? When you have municipal broadband all across the country and every municipal in every city, net neutrality is going to be written in the charter. Because guess what? That mayor wants a free and open internet too. So last question for you, and I want to shift gears a little bit here. How confident are you that our net neutrality bill will hold up here in California? I know they're battling it out in the court system right now. How confident are you that we're going to beat big cable on this one?
I'm not confident about it at all.
Mm, why?
The I'm not a lawyer, but I'll play one on TV here.
You're playing one on this show too. No, just kidding. I'm just kidding. But what are your thoughts?
If you look at the legal underpinnings of telecommunications regulation, it really is a federal ballgame. The states have a certain degree of discretion over telecommunication services that are provided within their boundaries. But when you pull back and look at the big picture, it's a federal ball game, and the states are going to have a difficult time going in and saying, we don't care what the federal government says about telecommunications policy. We're going to implement our own, even if it's contrary to what the federal government is doing. The Senate Bill 822 it was a worthy try, and you never know what the courts will do. It put a stake in the ground. I think it's a great thing, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to be pretty hard to beat that federal preemption. What will work, and I think where the states are on solid ground, and you're seeing it in some states, I think it was Vermont just passed a bill like this. Montana too, I think it was an executive policy where they've gone and said, well, we're not going to try and regulate internet service or broadband service, but we're only, state agencies and local governments are only allowed to buy service from companies that abide by net neutrality principles. That is pretty firm ground, because
Isn't there something like that in the California bill too, though? There's
no,
not.
separate bill, Senate Bill 460 last year that
So
got
that's the one that didn't pass.
That's the one that
Ah,
Comcast and the cable lobby, that's the one that got killed in California. That's the one that would have had teeth, and that was like I said, I all props to Scott Wiener for Senate Bill 822. It's a long shot. And at the end of the day, it's a long shot.
it's holding the front lines, which is the way I try to unpack it. I'm like, look, we got to hold the front lines on net neutrality, because if we lose the medium of the internet, it's going to be gone forever. But it's not. Our permanent fix is either flipping the leadership at the FCC so that we can get net neutrality back, and then even more importantly, building municipal infrastructure all over the country. That's what we need to do. We need to take it out of big cable's hands. And I know you like to put it more diplomatically, so those are my words. Those are my words, not yours. Steve Blum, where can people learn more about you?
Tellusventure.com. That's my website, my blog, or Steve Blum on Twitter. Follow me. I just post everything to there. I get a lot of stuff from another aimed at another Steve Blum, who's done a lot more for society than I have. He's a voice actor, but I got the handle, so I get the Twitter replies.
You could be a voice actor too. You got a good voice.
I know. I got a face for radio.
Steve, thanks for doing this. TellUsVenture.com. Steve's blog is fantastic. Those of you who are regulars on Get Your News On with Ron, you know we cover Steve's work a lot. He's helped us unpack a lot of issues pertaining to municipal broadband and net neutrality. Steve, thank you so much for your work. Again, that's TellUsVenture.com. And Steve, I hope we can have you back on again sometime to help unpack these things further.
Be happy to. I just, let's just, keep up the good fight, right?
Absolutely. Cheers, man.
Bye.